Hello readers, I'm Amy. Today I thought I would do something a little bit different because I couldn't sleep last night and my brain was on fire and I had this thought and I'm like, oh, that sounds like fun. So today we are going to be talking about books that I didn't finish, but that I think you should. So I actually started looking through a lot of books on my Libby app that I had returned without finishing, and I'm going to start with a sci-fi. And this is Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep by Philip K. Dick. Now, I've heard of Philip K. Dick. He's got like this sci-fi award named after him that some books will win, and I'd never actually read anything by him. So I started this book. I did not finish it, obviously. I got, I think, 2 chapters in. My problem when reading this was I was like between so many books and so many reading ideas that I wasn't taking time to sit down and read it through. So I'd read like a paragraph at a time and it wasn't coming together for me. But I remember the first chapter actually struck me as really, really funny. So it is a classic sci-fi. I believe it was written in the 40s, if I'm not mistaken. And I guess the original dystopian date in the book was like in the 1990s, and in the new editions it's 2021, which is really interesting. And the first chapter struck me as really funny. I wasn't expecting a sci-fi. I guess I don't expect sci-fi in general to have that much humor. I mean, you have Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, but that's more absurdism. It's not really my style. But you have these little boxes. I'm not sure if they're like pill dispensers, or it sounds like they like electrocute you a certain amount to make you feel a certain mood. And the guy's like, let's just have a good day, like I'm scheduled to have a good day on my little electro box. And she's like, oh, his wife is like, I'm scheduled to be depressed today, so that's not gonna work for me. And he's like, I didn't know that you could set your emotion box for depression. And she's like, you can if you try hard enough, because she'd been watching TV or something and started feeling all existential, and so she scheduled in depression for a couple times a month, and that just struck me as really funny. And then the guy has this sheep on the roof. It's an electric sheep because his real sheep died. And there's this idea that if you don't own a real animal, then you're not empathetic. But having a real animal, like buying a real animal, is very, very expensive. And he's looking to replace the sheep. And it turns into some sort of detective story. I do want to finish this. Just now is not the time for me to be trying to read this. Like I was just getting so easily distracted. And when I'm looking down, I'm looking at my phone because I took screenshots. Next up, I'm going to talk a little bit about Coon by Zora Neale Hurston. I own the physical book of this, and I also ended up getting the audiobook from Libby because sometimes if I have 2 versions of it, it encourages me to pick it up. And this is not what I was expecting it to be writing-wise, which is one of the big reasons why I did put it down. But I think you should pick it up. This is the story of the last black cargo. It was published, I think, just last year, posthumously, because Zora Neale Hurston died like mid-1900s. I own Their Eyes Were Watching God, and I loved that. It was just an amazing story, and you've got like this storm and very character driven. I really liked it. I was expecting something sort of like that. I know that Coon is nonfiction, but I was still kind of expecting this storytelling aspect to it that was in her style. I would actually hesitate to say that this book is written by her. It's largely a quoted interview, so most of this book is him telling, I don't remember what his name was, Cujo, I think is how you pronounce it. It's mostly just kind of a monologue from him with some interjecting bits from Zora Neale Hurston, like, oh, I went to his house and had dinner with him, and then he told this bit of the story. And it's very strong, like, older style African American vernacular English, I think is what you would call it. So the fact that I was listening to the audiobook and reading the physical book at the same time really, really helped, but this is definitely a book that I think would require all of your concentration to get through, and it wasn't what I was expecting. It's not really written by Zora Neale Hurston, it's collected by Zora Neale Hurston. That said, I think that this guy is an incredibly important person in history, and you should finish this book. I might, eventually. I don't know. I'm on the fence. Then we had a Little Real Estate Problem by Cliff Nesteroff. I talked about this book in my anti-haul for February, I believe, and I said it sounded interesting and I might actually pick it up. So I got it on Libby, and it's a history of comedy, but not in the way that I was expecting. Looking through my white American eyes, I was thinking that it was going to be like, oh, we're going to look at Native American comedians, but it was definitely a different tone than I was expecting. We had a Little Real Estate Problem, the unheralded story of Native Americans and comedy. It's not a comedic Native American history. It's very much, I believe they mentioned Buffalo Bill. It starts off talking about these Wild West shows and how Native Americans had a choice. They could perform and be the stereotypical Native American and make fun of their own traditions in a way, or they could go to jail for whatever stupid crime white people came up with on the spot. And it was very dark. Not that I wasn't expecting some darkness, but it was definitely a book that I think I would have to be in the mood for, and right now I don't think is the moment for my brain to be reading dark histories. That said, I would like to try this again sometime in the future when I'm a little more prepared for it, and I just think this is an incredibly important story. It's going to be a story that everyone should hear, everyone should be familiar with. It's one of those things that we should have learned about in school, because I grew up in Montana. Like, I grew up in the Wild West location, and I have family members who love like Wild West movies, and I never knew the history. That's of course coming from me as a white person, but like, that shouldn't be an excuse. Teachers and school systems and families, they should be teaching this history instead of ignoring it. So it was infuriating. I will read it eventually, just not right now. You should definitely finish this book, which is something that I could not do at the moment. Then I'm going to talk about The Bear and the Nightingale by Catherine Arden. This one I watched a video or another by Angela from Literature Science Alliance, and decided I was going to go ahead and pick it up. Obviously, I didn't finish it, but it's a really beautiful story. It's not beautiful story, it's beautifully written. I wouldn't say it's action-packed, it's definitely more character-driven, but it's based off of like a Russian fairy tale, and it's kind of this series that does a retelling of it. Again, at the time that I was reading it, I was like not in the headspace to be paying attention to it. I would listen to it and I would enjoy it, but then I had all these other books that I was reading and all of these other things going on in my life that I would forget about it, which is not ideal. So I do hope to eventually finish this when I'm in the mood for something a little slower. I can see myself reading this like dead of winter next year. Hopefully next winter there will actually be snow. For Montana, we are not very snowy this year. But some wintry time when it's super cold and I want to curl up by the toasty fire and I want a nice slow burn book, I definitely think that I'm going to pick this up again. And I don't know any Russian fairy tales, or at least I don't think I know any Russian fairy tales, and when it comes to fantasy, retellings just tend to work really well for me, so I would like to give this another shot eventually. If you think that it's the kind of book that you might really be into, by all means, you should definitely pick this up and finish it, which I did not do. So that's gonna be the video for today. I just thought that this sounded like a fun little idea, and I'm like, that's gonna be weird recommending books that I didn't finish myself, but I like it. So if you have any thoughts on these books, leave them down below. I would love to see other people doing a video like this. Like, what have you not finished that you still think you should have finished? that's gonna be it for me. Please like, subscribe, be my friend on social media. I'm gonna see all of you in my next video. Bye, friends.